Welcome to Jones and for Sports, where we make sports better.
What is good, y'all? It is your boy Jones, and welcome to another episode of Locker Room Sunday, presented by Jones for Sports. We make sports better. As always, I'm joined with my host, Luke. What's good, boy?
What up?
Not much. Obviously, sports is slowly coming back, but we haven't gotten it back yet. Football, we're still we're not too far away, but it doesn't look like anything has happened as far as the schedule being pushed back. So we're still waiting on Roger Goodell to make it official that the schedule will start on time, which is, we hope, because everything else is starting to open back up.
You forgot Hold on. You forgot to mention that the MLB draft is currently ongoing as we speak.
Oh, well, obviously, I'd rather you speak on that than me. You know more than I do.
Yeah, I don't know any of these kids. There's no point in researching that draft. They don't unless they go to it's only the top 10 picks that really come up in 2 years, maybe.
Right, that's true. But before we get into the discussion that we're going to get into today, obviously we got to shout out all of our Patreons. Thank you to each and every one of you for showing your love and support. As you know, you can sign up for just $1. But if you want some more cool stuff like Jones of the Sports face masks, Jones of the Sports t-shirts, you want to raffle for hats like Luke has, you got 2 of them. There's one right there, and then you got the other one. You're a Yankee fan. I don't see why not. You guys love your team. Show support. And you're going to get a lot of Yankee talk when you got Luke and E on here anyway. So show your support. If you're a true support Jones of the Sports, a true fan, show your support. Just sign up for at least $1, and you'll get cool things. So thank you to each and every one of you guys. But obviously we're here to talk about some football. And what we've recently been seeing throughout the media is, because we haven't been able to see sports, we've been having to come up with creative ways of talking about it. Yeah. So Luke came up with a great idea of how we're going to come up.
Well, time out. Backstory. Yes. I didn't come up with this.
You didn't come up with it, but you came up with us.
Okay, I was inspired by Barstool, specifically Pardon My Take, because I find that to be by far their best show. However, the NFL 100 list, it came out a couple months ago, and since we don't have really shit else to talk about, it seemed appropriate that me and Sean, since we know football, break down not the whole, anyone who played in the World War II or the Vietnam or Korean War era, I can't speak to that. Right. That's not me or we weren't even a thought at that point.
Right.
But from about the mid 80s to today, we know players, we know what we're talking about. So as opposed to breaking down guys from 1934, we figured we would take all the main position groups. We're not talking punters. We're not talking kick return specialists, because Devin Hester would win that anyway. But today, at least, quarterbacks, receivers, running backs, and tight ends are on the docket. And just so you guys know, me and Sean do not know each other's lists. Right. So we're going into this not blind, but we're leaving room for debate and, the live reaction, if you will. Right. Just to spicing it up a little bit.
Absolutely. And like you said, we're not going to really base it off of the top 100. We base it off of our own opinions of who we think is our top 5 in those positions. But you've heard us debate this a lot. These ESPN polls and NFL and all these other different polls, and a lot of them are bullshit. So we're coming up with our own honest opinion to our own list.
Yeah, right.
So, you want to kick it off?
Yeah.
We're going to start off with tight ends.
Yeah, this was probably the easiest just because really tight ends have not really become a thing since Mike Ditka was a big impact tight end, but the position itself evolved really into a skill position, mid 80s into the 90s. And I will kick it off actually with my number 5, who I think was like kind of the gateway guy into how we see the position today. Number 5 for me, Shannon Sharpe. Won a ring. If you want to give him credit, that's entirely up to you. But a lot of my decisions were not so much based on a ring or, because any dickhead can get a ring as long as you can crack a 53. But being an impact player on a Super Bowl team definitely helps. And being a player who I'm not going to say was, again, that team had Elway and Terrell Davis. Clearly, he was not the main piece of that offense. But if you take him away, I'm curious to see. I love the what-if game. If you remove him from that offense, would that offense have been as good? I really don't think so.
Right. I agree.
Who did you have at 5?
For me, I had, and this one he just made it, and it may be a little bit biased, Jason Witten.
Yeah, okay.
I put Jason Witten because being a Cowboy fan that I am, I've been able to watch him his whole career. And even though he has no rings, and even though he doesn't light up the highlight video charts and shit like that, he is a very, very consistent tight end who will year in, year out put up numbers, put up touchdowns, and not only that, he's great on the running scheme. So he's a great blocker, and he's a team captain. So it's unfortunate that he hasn't won rings. He hasn't been able to do that, but his numbers speak for themselves, and I think he will be a future Hall of Famer. So he just made the list. Me and you will speak, obviously, of the guys that didn't make it after this, but he just made it.
Okay, ironically, I had Witten at 4, and I'll tell you why. In light of no rings, the question it's like a flow chart. You have a ring, and were you a contributor, like a big contributor to a Super Bowl team? For Witten, that's obviously no, not his fault, but supremely consistent, not really ever injured.
Right.
And then the ultimate question, Hall of Famer. 100% yes.
Yep, absolutely.
So you factor all of that into the equation, that was kind of a no-brainer.
Yep.
So now my 4. Who's your 4?
At 4, I had Antonio Gates. I think
at 4.
At 4,
oh.
And I felt the same way about Shannon Sharpe at 5, but we'll get into that.
Okay.
And Antonio Gates at 4. We all know what he's been able to do in his time with the Chargers.
Yep.
He was a staple in that organization. Obviously, no rings, but like you said, when you got the criteria of being consistent, no rings, unfortunately, but will he be a future Hall of Famer? Absolutely. I think no question he'll be one of those because, like you said, there's not too many Hall of Fame tight ends in general. But when you talk about the Hall of Fame tight ends, he's going to be mentioned in them. So,
the modern era tight end, like I broached with guys like Sharpe, the skill tight end, not just the blocking tight end, is relatively new. So a guy like Gates is going to be one of the first people, and Tony Gonzalez is in there too, but Gates is going to be one of those people who really helped push for that kind of skill tight end to even be scouted in the first place.
Right. Right.
Okay, so you had Antonio Gates at 4. Okay, I had him at 3.
Okay.
So we're fairly similar.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna speak on him again. So who was your 3?
My 3 was Shannon Sharpe.
Okay.
And the reason why, for me, why you had him at 5 was weird to me, and especially over Jason Witten. Shannon Sharpe is a 3-time champion, 2 with the Broncos, 1 with the Ravens.
Yeah.
Granted, the team with the Ravens, he didn't do much.
Yeah, I give no offensive player from the 2000 Ravens any credit for winning that Super Bowl. That was one of the 5 greatest defenses of all time.
Absolutely. But yeah, and he was just knowing his story, being a fan of his, knowing where he's come from, and being a team captain on that Broncos team. I know you mentioned it earlier that he obviously played with John Elway. What's his name? The running back, Davis. Yep. And so he played with great players, but he was also the captain of that team.
Yeah.
Like when you speak of the leaders, he was the leader of that team. So he had a huge impact on that team, not just from what he did, but he held a lot of the records before Tony Gonzalez broke them. He still holds some of the records now. So just knowing his history, shit like that, he definitely made my top 3.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to shortchange him. It's a pretty known fact that he, was not just a captain, but he was one of the best trash talkers of all time.
Absolutely.
He's like just a ball of energy, that kind of guy. That's Sharpe.
Yep.
The difference between it, like if you, and again, that flow chart again, if you pass all the previous rounds, who would I take between Witten or Sharpe? I'm taking Witten because A, longer career, B, may not be as flashy. I like the Heath Miller type of tight end personally. I don't need I get that there's a role for that, but receivers, he had receiver mentality. Not the diva so much, but the shit talker.
He's supposed to be a receiver. They actually put him at tight end.
Right.
Which is the funny thing. Yeah.
Also, if you're asking me between Sharpe or Witten, for example, who do I want blocking? It's Jason Witten.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
So I understand Witten's not going to get me a 50-yard touchdown, or maybe rarely at most.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't need, in my opinion, my tight end to be able to do that all the time. That's not his primary job. His job is to be, in my opinion, the safety blanket, run the middle, and have good enough hands for at least 90% catch rate.
Right. I feel you. Like you said, you pretty much explained it. You like the Heath Miller role.
Yeah.
So that pretty much explains it. But me, on the other hand, I love the explosive tight ends, and especially how they're being used today. The Travis Kelce's and the Kittles and stuff like that. So I think even in today's game, Shannon Sharpe would still be a force to be reckoned with.
Oh yeah,
because he was very explosive. They called him quick play Shay because he would get one catch and he'd score a 99-yard touchdown or something like that. So for that reason, things like that, and him being the leader that he was, he was almost my top 2. He almost made it, but I had to humble myself a little bit.
Speaking of top 2, this is pretty within the tight end realm. The top 2 is pretty kind of non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Who's your 2? Who's your 1?
My 2 is Tony Gonzalez, and my 1 is Gronk. I know that you can flip those 2.
No, I did.
You did, okay.
Yeah. Oh, and to me, there's only one reason: longevity. Gronk is the most injury-prone tight end of this entire group.
Absolutely.
So I can't guarantee when Gronk's on the field, he's the biggest difference maker of anyone on this list.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I have him for more than 8 games a year.
Right. I definitely hear you on that.
That's the only reason I put Gonzalez over him. That is the only fucking reason.
And that's for me, I didn't even I put that into mind, but I didn't really made it, affect him. Because to me it was like, yes, obviously he was injury prone, but we know what his career would have been if he wasn't. And what he already did with that while being injury prone. So that alone just was like, all right, that's impressive.
And the only other knock I have to put on Gronk, only played for one team, one system, one quarterback. Gonzalez was a difference maker for Kansas City and Atlanta.
And, well, you're absolutely right about that. The other thing is, Rob is still building his resume. He's not finished.
Well, okay. Now, so that was my little asterisk. If Gronk in Arians' offense, which is not tight end friendly, ask OJ Howard fantasy owners, if in Bruce Arians' offense, where literally that is where the Heath Miller role is designed, that system, Miller took a lot of heavy shots. Gronk can eat him if it's upper body. But he's not – the splash plays will probably get drawn up for him, assuming he's in game shape.
Right.
But he's going to be like a PPR nightmare for, anyone facing whoever owns him in fantasy. Because Brady's going to throw to him religiously.
Yeah.
It's literally –
well, he'll have some more weapons.
Well, right, but put Gronk in the Heath Miller situation.
Right.
To preserve him and Brady. But you have 3 good receivers and other tight ends who can run the deep shit.
Right. You're absolutely right. That's exactly how they should use it.
The whole point of it doesn't matter what you traded Gronk for. You have to keep him on the field or else you lose the trade.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, so we both had Gronk 1 and 2 with Gonzalez. You had him at 1, I had him at 2, vice versa. Who was on your?
The only thing that hurt Gonzalez for me was he wasn't able to, get that ring, and really the Falcons didn't really give him an opportunity. So
yeah,
I feel bad for him on that, but
yeah, I can't disagree with that one. Just Tony Gonzalez is everything.
He was absolutely no question,
including longevity. That's humongous for me. Gronk played 8 years, was injured for over half of those.
Yeah.
But when he's on the field, he's the greatest tight end of all time. It's not close.
Yeah. No question.
Okay. Who's on your just missed?
My just missed was Kellen Winslow.
I assume you're talking about senior, not
senior.
Junior. Okay.
Senior.
Yeah. In many circles, he is the greatest tight end of all time.
Absolutely. He changed it. He changed the game for tight ends. Absolutely. And he inspired a lot of these guys that we just mentioned to be what they were now.
Yeah.
Or what their careers turned out to be.
He's the torchbearer.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
He's the one that proved it could be done out of that position. So all kudos go to Dakota Winslow. He was on my just missed. But again, he just didn't fit my parameter.
Yeah.
The 2 that did fit my parameter are both currently playing right now. Or actually all 3. Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle.
I wanted to put them on, but they're still in their careers and it's early, so I didn't want to say anything.
Yeah, I couldn't.
But absolutely.
Kelsey's the only one who has enough service time to have been considered seriously for this list.
Yeah.
But Ertz has the ring. Kelsey has the ring. Kittle could probably get one. But, but when you look at Kelsey and Kittle specifically, how we just mentioned the torchbearer, Kelsey and Kittle are going to be the 2 when it comes to free agency who set the new market standard for that position, which is equivalent. That to me is like the equivalent status of Kellen Winslow being the skill set torchbearer.
Absolutely.
Okay, you ready for the wideouts?
Yep.
Okay. Who did you have at 5?
At 5, I had Isaac Bruce,
Oh,
one of the greatest tight
Okay.
end. I mean, receivers. Go ahead.
No, okay. No. I like that.
Isaac Bruce, one of the greatest receivers. Should have had at least 2 rings. Got one taken by Brady, but he was a part of the greatest turf on earth. Greatest
Show on turf.
Greatest show on turf. And I was just that year alone when they won the Super Bowl, being a fan, not being a fan of that team, but watching that team closely that year and really seeing how great he was.
Yeah.
And following his career from there on was special. So he set the bar for a lot of guys. Guys like T.O. and Randy Moss and shit like that. Like they had to compete with them. They were looking at him as one of those guys that like, all right, no one's gonna reach Jerry, but he's on the radar. Like people were looking at him like that at that time. So he had to make my list. One of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, he was on my just missed. My 5 is Antonio Brown. There's a period, and just to quantify this, Julio Jones is also on my just missed. Here's the reason why. Antonio Brown because right now he's a mental patient, but for a period of time, nobody could touch him.
Absolutely.
And the best corner in the league in his peak, I'll make the argument Chris Harris was a top 3 when AB was, and he was on a game streak of not allowing touchdowns. He destroyed Chris Harris.
Yeah.
It didn't matter who you could put him up against. Ty Law, and he'd have a good game.
Yep.
You can't scheme for him. And the only reason he fell to 5 is I would say he's the most cancerous tight end, or not tight end, wide receiver of all time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you break down the numbers, how many AP first team All Pros, how many Pro Bowls, no rings, but that's no Steeler from the Killer B era has one.
Right,
but
exactly.
You're talking about dominant. Antonio Brown had that, and it was for more than 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely. He had a stretch where he was by far, or close to by far, the number 1 receiver in the league.
He's the only person who legitimately, him and DeAndre Hopkins are the only 2 players that have ever given Julio a run for his money or beaten Julio as the number 1 receiver in the league.
Right. And not only that, he was dangerous in special teams too. So
yeah, he was a disgusting punt returner. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, who's your 4?
At 4, I have Larry Fitzgerald.
Okay.
No question, one of the best receivers of all time. I think he's number 2 in the receiving list of receiving right after Jerry Rice, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And same with touchdowns, I think.
Yeah.
Or close to it. Future Hall of Fame, first ballot, no question. Spent his whole career with the same team. Should have a ring, but your Steelers stole it from him.
Not that.
Yeah. Larry Fitzgerald, just a class act. Just with everything, you could never really say anything bad about him.
No.
And then when you talk about Larry Fitzgerald, you have to talk about his hands. One of the best catchers of all time. One of the best hands of all time.
Would you like to know a fun stat on Fitzgerald? Because this is like baseball realm awesome.
I think I know the stat you're going to say, but go ahead.
He has more tackles than drops in his career.
Yep.
That's insane.
Insane. Fucking insane. So for shit like that, you can't leave him out of the top 5.
I had him at 4 too. Just so we're clear. So we can move up to level 3.
All right.
So, number 3 for me, Calvin Johnson.
Wow.
Calvin Johnson.
Wow.
Okay. Man. Calvin Johnson was the most dominant, and I'm talking physically imposing, you don't get a name like Megatron for if you don't dominate everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's the problem, and this is not even a problem with him. Him and Barry Sanders were robbed of good careers because the Lions are the worst run team in the NFL.
Yep.
For a longer period of ineptitude than the Browns and the fucking Redskins.
No question.
If they treated Megatron fairly, he would have had at least another 4 years, and God knows what kind of. He's the only weapon they had. It was him and Nate Burleson.
Yeah.
And you still couldn't stop him. He's drawing double coverage. You can't stop him.
Oh, I know. As
But
a Cowboys
any
fan,
safety
I know.
you want, you're not stopping him. He's too fucking big. He's too fat. He's a fucking robot.
He really was. He for me, he was on my just miss only because of the career span was short. Obviously, for the reasons you said.
That's
he
the
just
only
didn't
knock
want
on
to deal with that
and
bullshit.
it's not his fault. That's not his fault.
It's not his fault.
Like, again, people going low on Gronk and hurting him every year, not really his fault either. But
right.
Yeah, I can understand your demotion.
For me, my 3 was T.O.
Okay.
When you talk about the greatest receivers of all time, for me, the top 3 is Jerry, Moss, and T.O.
Okay.
So obviously Jerry is number 1. Then a lot of people put T.O. in front of Moss, Moss in front of T.O. For me, it's T.O. Basically, with every team he's ever been with, he's put up numbers. Even when everyone counted him out, he went to Buffalo and put up numbers. Only thing he was short of was rings, and they obviously they fucked him when it came to the Hall of Fame and didn't put him in on his first or second ballot. He got in on his third ballot, which is ridiculous to me. He has a lot of the records as well. People hated him because of his fucking attitude. But last time I checked, your attitude doesn't get you into the Hall of Fame. Just because you have a good or a bad attitude does not get you into the Hall of Fame or put stats on the board. Yeah, he was a show-off, but he had every right to be a show-off because he fucking backed it up. Yeah. No one could fucking stop him. He was one of those guys that when he was on, if you pissed him off, he was going to be even worse. He was one of those guys that you had to double team him. He would, he can turn a fucking hit into a 99-yard touchdown if he wanted to. He was that dangerous. The only thing, people just hated him because of his attitude and his show-off ability and shit like that. But I loved it. Even when he came to the Cowboys, we didn't do much. Obviously, we had some good records and shit like that. It didn't amount too much because we didn't win the playoffs. But there's no question T.O. is by far top 3 in the receiver conversation. Okay,
I'm going to slightly disagree. If you ask me about T.O., aside from the driveway workout, the crying at the press conference, there's one game that sticks out in my head with him, and this is literally what put Antonio Brown ahead of him. He was number 6 on my list. T.O.
Wait. T.O.'s 6 on your list?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Well, him and Antonio Brown are equally cancerous, but Antonio Brown didn't really actually play a game or more than one game for any other team. Right. T.O. and his first game in Philly as a Cowboy had probably the worst game of his career. I never saw that with Antonio.
Okay. But that's one game.
Yeah, but that's the difference. I never saw Antonio Brown have a shit game. The only time Antonio Brown disappeared from the stat sheet was when Ben didn't throw to him. Also, I get that T.O. is probably, if you're looking for the physically dominant, the Calvin Johnson style, Julio Jones style receiver, T.O. is obviously going to be top 3 on that list.
He was them before them.
I 100% agree. No, I'm not here to argue that T.O.'s not a fucking animal because he's insane. However, it's the same guy. I didn't get to see enough of him in pressure, and it's not because he couldn't stick with a team because of his attitude. Antonio Brown was the same thing, but at least it took 9 years. So slight edge. I'm talking the slightest of edges to Antonio Brown because of that one game, and he had to bounce back. But Antonio Brown, because T.O. made the haul, Antonio Brown can go in too.
Right, no question. T.O., I mean, Antonio Brown will definitely get in the hall. His numbers speak for themselves.
Right, they're too good. But they're so similar. The difference is the style of receiver. If I want a physically dominant guy who's the opposite of a cancer, I would rather take Calvin Johnson.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that you had it. I thought he was no question in your top 5.
No, I don't hate T.O. by any means because I was a ride or die Antonio Brown fan, but they're the same fucking guy aside from style of receiver.
Right. Okay.
So if you're gonna ask me of like the shit talking receivers, he blows Ocho Cinco out of the water.
No question.
Ocho Cinco didn't even sniff this list. Okay, so you had T.O. at 3. I had Calvin. My number 2 is Randy Moss.
We agree.
Okay, and so if your number 2 is Moss, your number 1 is Jerry Rice.
Right.
Okay.
There's no debate there.
Okay, so we can move on. On my just miss, I also had Michael Irvin.
Yep.
Obviously Isaac Bruce. Marvin Harrison was close.
Yeah, he was close on mine too.
Then I also had Julio, DeAndre, and Chris Carter.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much the guys that you had on your list, like Calvin Johnson and Antonio Brown, they were just on my just miss. Yep.
Yeah. So at least we're in each other's ballpark. It's not like no one's throwing Ocho Cinco. No one's throwing fucking
Julio. I mean, Julian Edelman and shit.
Oh God. All right. Running backs.
This is where it gets tough.
Yeah, this was the hardest of all of them.
By far.
Okay, who's your 5?
And this, like I said, this was by far the toughest one. So any of this list could really go any way. But at my 5, and my just miss list is fucking long shit. But my just made it was Eric Dickerson.
Okay.
He just made it for me. He was a pantheon basically when it comes to the running back position for the Rams. Unfortunately, obviously, he did not win a ring. But when you talk about guys like Walter Payton and Barry Sanders and things like that, and someone that was very elusive and can break tackles and turn nothing into something, he was one of those guys. And he broke plenty. I think he still does have the record for the most yards in a season. So that just speaks to how dangerous he was on the field. And he was one of the first, I think, if not the first, big running back as far as height. I think he was like 6'6" or something like that.
Yeah, he was stupidly huge.
He was stupidly huge. So he was one of those guys that was like, oh, wow, what the fuck did we do with this? And then you add the talent on top of that. It was just like he was just unstoppable. I know he didn't break your list because of the time period, but he was one of those guys
he was still on my just missed because I think you still see a lot of Dickerson, like highlight-wise, comparison-wise. He's still relevant enough to have been in my just missed. I kept it a little bit, like you said, just a little bit more recent. Number 5 for me is Ladainian Tomlinson.
Okay.
So the biggest knock I have against LT is who he played for. The Chargers were not his decision.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jets It's the fucking Jets.
Yeah.
But monster, absolute monster.
Mm-hmm.
There's really not a whole lot. I mean, anyone who knows, like, anyone who ever watched LT play once knows how disgusting he was.
Absolutely. He was a monster. He was a
Just
little
to clarify,
Emmitt Smith. He was basically Emmitt Smith.
and again, if I backed up my list another 10 years, Dickerson would have been on here, just so we're clear.
Right.
I kept mine just a little bit more, recent.
Right.
Who was your 4?
At 4, I had Adrian Peterson.
Okay.
So like I said with Eric Dickerson, Adrian Peterson was the only running back to get even remotely close to it. We had a few, what's his name, from the Titans
Chris
get
Johnson.
to 2000. What was his name?
Chris Johnson.
Chris Johnson get close to it, but Adrian Peterson was the closest to it. I think he was like 76 yards away.
Yeah, it was close.
It was really close. He had one more game and he would have got it. I think he needed like 100, something crazy in the last game in order to get it. So, but just watching him, his whole career, because we both watched him his whole career coming out of Oklahoma, and he was one of those guys who was just like, wow. It doesn't matter what like I said, he was like Eric Dickerson. He turned nothing into something. And not only that, he can bulldoze you, run you over, and then just take it 99 yards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was special. Till this day, he's still doing he's obviously not the same that he was back in those days, but just electrifying. You had to send all your guys in the box in order to try to contain him, and even that couldn't even slow him down. And like you said about Ladainian Tomlinson, his team is what hurt him. He was never able to have team success, so that definitely hurt him. But individual success was no question, and I think he'll be a future Hall of Famer.
Oh yeah, no, he's 100% a Hall of Famer. At 4 for me, I had Marshall Faulk.
I like that.
Yeah. I define Marshall Faulk as Le'Veon Bell before Le'Veon Bell.
I like that. Marshall Faulk.
Again, when you said it with Bruce, greatest show on turf, should have gotten a ring, but I like to do it all back. Like, I don't need you to just run dives into the fucking guard's ass.
Right.
If you want to be the 5th or 6th receiver, I'm okay with that too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just to expedite this, AP is at my 3.
I like it. Right.
But let me just speak one thing on Peterson that you did not bring up. Never in a million years after the type of knee injury he had did I expect him to not come back, but to still maintain dominance for an extended period of time. Super impressive.
And win an MVP. Or did Peyton win it? He won it, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. He won it. Peyton won Comeback Player of the Year or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, I completely forgot about that. It's one of the craziest things we've ever seen in our lives. I know a lot of people counted him out after that.
You know who I compared Peterson to in terms of just like who does he remind you of? Bo Jackson.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Absolutely.
Similar with the devastating injury, except for Bo, it killed his career.
Right.
And again, had Bo had the 20-plus year medical advancement that Peterson had, probably could have kept going. But it's the same guy. Peterson lacks but doesn't dazzle you with ability. He'll just outrun the shit out of you. And if he has to, he'll go through you or over you.
Yeah. No question.
And he was not a juke guy, as you know. He's not like a Shady McCoy. He's not a one-cut guy. But he can hit you. He can break a safety off with like a spin if he had to, or the stiff arm. He had other he's a power guy who has enough speed attributes to just
Right,
be like almost a perfect running back.
Mm-hmm. No question. No
Who's
question.
your two? Who is your two?
We're at 3. Oh no,
Okay.
yeah. You just said your 3. I didn't say my 3.
Yeah, with your 3.
My 3 is Barry Sanders, and for a lot of people, he might even be 1. But for me, the reason why I didn't have him at 1 or 2 is because for the same reasons why I didn't give, like you said, Megatron his credit as far as career-wise, longevity. Had a very short career, I think 9 seasons. But in that 9 seasons, he lit it up. He was at that time one of the by far the most elusive running back in the league. No one could touch him. He really defined turning nothing into something.
Yeah.
He was one of those first guys to do it.
No, he's the king. He's the king of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people think that if it wasn't for his short career, he would have been the greatest running back of all time. So for that reason, I had to put him in my top 3.
Okay.
Obviously, we were allowed to see him, but we were very young. But just seeing his highlights and him winning an MVP as well, that validates that as well, and shit like that. Time All-Pro. He was amazing. So if it wasn't for a short career, I think he would have went on to been the greatest running back of all time. Probably wouldn't have won the Super Bowl because of the team he was on, and we know that team never mounted it to anything, even when he was on the team. So we know how that would have ended, but we know I believe he still would have been one of the greatest running backs. And for the younger audience that's watching this, if you never heard of Barry Sanders or you never knew what he was like, Saquon Barkley is the spitting image of him. Someone that bounces off a tackle and just take it. Yep. Turn nothing into something. That's basically what Barry Sanders was.
Yep. My number 2, Emmitt Smith. I know he's on your list somewhere, so I'm going to save the Emmitt Smith breakdown for when you talk about him. I have to give you my 1 right now, though.
All right.
My number 1 is Barry Sanders.
Okay.
There's only 5 defenses, maybe, in NFL history that I'm convinced could contain him to under 100 yards. And that's an
right.
if.
Yeah, and those are the greatest defenses of all time.
And for the young fans of ours that may or may not, who should look up Barry Sanders highlights, if you want to see the most disgusting run ever made by a running back, it's not Marshawn Lynch and the Beastquake. That's number 2.
Right.
What Barry did against your boys when the D lineman literally lost him, hands on hips, couldn't find him as he's running 10 yards past him to a fucking touchdown. That is the most disgusting run in NFL history.
Yeah, no question.
That doesn't happen to pro athletes.
Right. And this is when guys were getting killed. These hits were brutal, and that's why he didn't last long.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep.
Between that and the Lions,
yeah,
Barry could have played another It's the same argument as Calvin Johnson.
Yep.
If any other team, he would have played more years.
No question.
But Barry Sanders is by far the best running back in NFL history. I know you're probably going to say Emmitt Smith, which is not a bad argument. But if I need a guy who is not going to get tackled, Emmitt doesn't have it like Barry did.
Right.
So now explain to me, who's your 2? Emmitt's your 1, probably. Who's your 2?
My 2 is Emmitt Smith.
Oh, okay.
My 2 is Emmitt Smith. It was hard between these top 3.
Now I'm very curious to see who your 1 is.
My Emmitt Smith is my 2. Obviously, I know his history. He was my favorite Cowboy growing up. the number one rushing all time.
Yep.
In history. He was like a Barry Sanders kind of. He wasn't exactly like Barry Sanders, but he was small and he can get through. Through a lot, and he just did a lot. He was amazing to watch. Being a little bit of this is biased because I'm a fan, but his numbers speak for themselves as well. So he had a lot of the rushing titles. He's a three-time champion.
You
get the MVP.
You get the homer pass for Smith because he is one of the three greatest running backs of all time.
Absolutely, no question. He's two.
Who in the fuck did you put at one?
My number one.
If you say Zeke, I'm going to smack the shit out of you.
It is not Ezekiel Elliott. It is Walter Payton.
Okay.
Walter Payton.
Okay.
Can't argue to me the greatest. Right. To me, when you add everything up to it, if you want to add a little Emmitt, if you want to add a little bit of Barry, you want to add like longevity, rings, he's got everything they had. So that's why he was my number one.
Yeah. So again, had I done my list to an all-time or at least up to the Korean War, Peyton would have been one, not close.
Right.
Comparatively, again, since I shortened up my time frame, he's not on here. He would have been number one if I did this any other way.
Right.
Okay, so that's.
But I like that we did it. I like that we have. You have the recent list. I have a little bit more.
Yeah, mine. I like to. I can research, but again, for a guy like Peyton, if you even compared to Barry Sanders, the amount of film you're going to get on like a YouTube highlight reel is just not going to be probably the same.
Right, absolutely.
So for someone who didn't see Walter Payton play, it's hard for me to rank him.
I hear you.
Barry was alive. Who was on now? This I'm curious. Who was on your just missed? I can tell you who was so hard to keep off this list because he was my and still is my favorite player of all time.
For me, you mentioned a few of them, Ladainian Tomlinson.
Yeah.
But for me, my just missed, and he just missed it in front of Eric Dickerson, was Gore, Frank Gore.
Okay, I like that. He's
longevity.
on my just missed.
Yep, longevity. I think he's top 4, maybe even top 3 in the all-time rushing list. Unfortunately, he hasn't won a ring, but he's been in the playoffs, and when he's been in the playoffs, he's done well. A big short back, but a fucking monster. Like, he defined being a monster as a little guy.
Yeah.
And then longevity. He still plays. I'm pretty sure he's still signed to a team now, if I'm not mistaken. So
I believe you're right.
I think he will be a future Hall of Famer.
He'll go in.
So he was on my just miss.
My quote unquote number 6, Jerome Bettis. I love that. A man that fucking big should not have been able to played that position in general. But for a 265, 270-pound man, that fucking big, to dance around a field like a fucking ballerina, and then the only player I've ever seen make Brian Urlacher look like a modified football, like, rag doll.
Yeah.
And again, and he's also top 10 all time in yards. I think he's actually top 5.
Yeah.
And he got his ring.
Yep, he sure did.
But Jerome Bettis,
he might make my top 5. Honestly,
my favorite player of all time.
The bus.
Not just my favorite Steeler. I fucking love Jerome. When I'm growing up, I was I was always like not a fan,
remember.
but I was always a bigger kid. When knowing that I was born in Pittsburgh, which is the reason I'm a Steeler fan, and then you factor in a huge fucking guy who's just dominating people, needs 4 people to tackle him.
Yeah.
It's like brutal poetry. It's beautiful to watch him play.
Right. If for the younger audience, if you don't know who Jerome Bettis is, definitely look him up.
Highlight tape.
Definitely a fun highlight tape. If you want to see guys get run over, he was beast mode before beast mode.
I'll do you one better.
The bus, I said.
I'll tell you exactly what you look up on YouTube. Jerome Bettis versus Ray Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
That is some super entertaining shit.
Absolutely. No question. He even did a more recent commercial. I forgot what commercial he's in. State Farm or something like that.
Yeah.
Where he's trucking all those people. That's what he did in the NFL. That's exactly what it was. That commercial wasn't fake. That's exactly what it looked like.
Yeah.
So
the other guys on my just missed: Terrell Davis, Chris Johnson, Priest Holmes, Edgerrin James, and then the aforementioned Bettis.
Yep. I like all of those. Definitely. All deserve to be mentioned. No question.
Oh, and Frank Gore. But you already brought him up.
Right.
And now the ever elusive, not even elusive, but the ever debated the pantheon of position ranking.
This was a tough one. The bottom three was a tough one.
Yeah. Well, you kicked this one off. Who'd you have at 5?
At 5, I had John Elway.
Okay.
And this one, it was tough for me to really switch between 4, 5, and 3, kind of, especially 4 and 5. But John Elway, 2-time champ, part of the Bronco team, like we mentioned with Shannon Sharpe and Terrell Davis. He went to 5 Super Bowls, lost the first 3, but then they finally built the team around him, got Shannon Sharpe and guys like that, and was able to win Super Bowls and validate how great of a quarterback he was.
Yep.
I remember coming out, he was the number 1 drafted quarterback in the league, and everyone was talking about him on how great of an arm he was. And I remember growing up also, knowing that I was a Cowboy fan, but I just remember that it was the 90s, even though the Cowboys ran it. After the Cowboys were running it in the 90s, it was the Broncos. So I remember that being an older kid after the Cowboys, not being that old at that time when the Cowboys were winning. The Cowboys winning their last chip in '95. I was 4. So after that, I was a little bit older, and that's when the Broncos started going on that run. So for me, I just always remember John Elway being in that conversation, the Broncos being one of the top teams of all time. So for that, I had to put him in my top 5.
Would you like to know a fun fact that has nothing to do with football about John Elway?
Go ahead.
He was drafted higher in the Major League Baseball draft than Tony Gwynn.
Wow. I knew he was drafted into the
last
MLB,
pick, second round by this team right here.
Wow.
Probably good thing he stuck to. But okay, obviously Elway had the fucking rocket for an arm. Hence, and we see this a lot now with guys like Winston, who played at Florida State both ways.
Yeah.
Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, all of which were drafted in the MLB because of, obviously, arm strength.
Yep.
The difference, Tony Gwynn, and this is more of a take it deep argument, but we'll inject a little baseball into this. Mm-hmm. Tony Gwynn is not only the greatest cadre of all time, he's easily one of the 20 best players of all time. And John Elway was picked before him.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Very crazy.
Elway is on my just missed.
Before you go on to that, who was the team? Oh, you said by the Yankees.
Yankees picked him. Last pick, second round.
I mean, so obviously the Yankees don't regret that because they still turned out well. But
not like he fucking right. we also drafted Garrett Cole. It only cost us $324 million to get him.
Right.
Okay. Elway was my first one off.
Okay.
My number 5 is Drew Brees.
He was my number 6.
In spite of recent assholery,
Yes.
Records has him. Ring has it.
Has it.
And again, despite recent douche nonsense comment, great teammate.
Doesn't take away his play on the field.
If he was, there's certain organizations in the NFL, and if you're a fan of a team like, let's say, the Jets, the Browns, the Lions, the Chargers are on that list too. Had he not started and played so many years with a snake-bit franchise, I would make the argument he might have another ring.
Yeah, no question.
But Drew Brees also validated the short quarterback argument. So you can thank a guy like Drew Brees for Russell Wilson being a thing, for Kyler Murray being a thing.
No question.
Different style of athlete, obviously. But in terms of just absolute monster, Brees is
sticking in the pocket, not being scared. Because when you think about small quarterbacks, you're usually thinking of a mobile quarterback. Drew Brees is not a mobile quarterback. No. He's sticking in the pocket, and he's gonna make that throw, and he's very accurate.
But again, kudos to Drew Brees, because we're talking pocket guys. Let's say you compare Brees to like a Brett Favre.
Mm-hmm.
Favre would throw an interception where Brees would be smart enough to sense pressure and just throw it away.
Yep.
That's a humongous boost to him, is just overall instinct and football IQ.
Yep.
Now, the reason he's lower on my list, and again, he's still on here, but he's always had elite. He made Marcus Colston wasn't supposed to be a monster. Drew Brees made him a monster, but Colston also caught all the passes because
right.
So he's always had at least a semi-good, if not monstrous, offense to play with. Even now, with Kamara and Thomas.
No question. They've always built that offense around him.
Right. Ever since he got to New Orleans. But then even in San Diego, he had Gates and LT in their prime.
Yep.
And fucking, what's his name? Who was the Vincent Jackson?
Vincent Jackson, yeah.
So he's had weapons most of his career, like the vast majority. But a good quarterback will find those weapons and not take the sacks, not throw the picks. Awareness is what puts him higher on my list.
Yeah, Drew Brees, no question. It was really tough for me to not have him on my list, but for me, the reason why I didn't give him, he didn't make my list is because everyone on my list, everyone on my list has been to more championships. They haven't won more, but they've been to more Super Bowls. So for that reason,
aside from the last 4 years and that one ring where they were destined to win because of the hurricane.
Yep.
Name one time where he had a competent defense.
Right. No, you're absolutely right.
I don't see. Quarterbacks are different. They can carry you a good way, but they're not. If you put Brees with Bill Belichick, they would have won 10 rings.
Yeah, no question.
Minimum.
No question. Yeah, no question. Like you said, he didn't have the defense. He didn't build that defense around him. If he had more defense, and let's not even forget that it's possible. We don't know, obviously, but the Saints got 2 trips possibly taken away to the Super Bowl away from them. So they had 2 opportunities to put Brees maybe even higher on my list.
Someone looked this up for me. Go to Pornhub and type in New Orleans Saints. They should have a porn star profile. They get fucked more than any team in the league.
No question.
It's not close.
No question.
And now they have to play Tom Brady twice a year, so there's going to be more fucking going toward New Orleans because now Sean Payton
is only getting older.
League.
Right.
Who is your 4?
At 4, I had Brett Favre, a champion, one of the best arm slingers of all time. When you think about Patrick Mahomes, Brett Favre is one of the first names brought up.
Yeah.
Because he was one of those guys. When Now, obviously, a lot of people talk about, and you mentioned it just a second ago, Brett Favre throwing interceptions. He leads the league in all-time history in interceptions.
Yep.
But at the same time, I don't fault him for that because he was one of those guys that was like, you know what, I'm going to take the risk. He wasn't scared of the moment. He made a lot of great plays as well. So he made up for those interceptions sometimes. Some plays that were just like, all right, that's definitely going to be an interception. But he made it work sometimes. You know what I mean? So, and he's been to the Super Bowl twice. So that's the reason why I had him above Brees and shit like that.
I have a question for you. You putting Favre on your list means Aaron Rodgers has to be off your list. Okay, good. just to clarify, Rodgers is on my list, but he wasn't really close.
Yeah.
What you just said is what I was going to reinforce. If you take away some of those interceptions, including the one with the Vikings, as in the NFC title game, that to me is the difference. That to me is humongous. That to me is like the TO scenario. Pressure.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about from a DN. I'm talking situational pressure. Are you performing or are you going to crumble?
Yeah.
And I get you when you're a gunslinger, you live and die by the gun. He just died too much.
He was today's Jameis Winston.
Yeah, with a splash of Tony Romo playoff mojo.
Right. But to his credit, his team in those early 90s, I think it was, he had a lot of success.
Yeah.
Or maybe late 90s. He had a lot of success. He brought his team to the playoffs a lot. Even though he was interception prone, he still had a lot of success. So that's the reason why. And he obviously won a ring and lost one to the Broncos. So that's the reason why he made my top 5.
All right. My number 4 is Dan Marino. Best player of all time to never win a ring.
Yeah, no question.
Best quarterback in University of Pittsburgh history. There's really not – see, with the quarterbacks, I don't really have to describe them much because anyone who listens to our channel and our podcast should know that Dan Marino is one of the best quarterbacks of all time. It's really not arguable. I know we did top 5s. Even if you left him off, he's in your top 10.
Yeah, no question.
Right. So, case in point, Dan Marino is just the easiest way to say best player to never win a ring.
Yep,
period.
Absolutely. That period. Point blank period. He actually just missed my list as well. Well, he's on your list, but he missed my list. But like you said, he's no question the greatest player to never win a ring. No question. Before all these guys that we just named, Brett Favre, John Elway, it was him. He had all the records before Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and all that. It was him. He is the Tony Gonzalez of the quarterback position.
Yeah, right.
One of the greatest to ever do it at the quarterback position, but just doesn't have the ring.
Who's your 4?
But with I just wanted to go back with Brett Favre just for to validate my argument with him. He also has 3 MVPs, season MVPs. So that also helped validate that for me.
Yeah, Brett Favre was in the top.
What do we got? 3?
Just missed. No, you're at 4.
We just did 4 with Brett Favre.
Oh, okay, right. So who's your 3?
3 is Peyton Manning.
Okay, he was
the GOAT. These other 2, which is almost unarguable in some cases, but to me, for a long period of time, watching him grow up, he was the GOAT to me. Before Tom Brady started winning all these rings, if he was able to win more rings, there would be no argument. It would be Peyton Manning, because when you talk about dissecting a defense, to me, there's no better quarterback in the history of the game that dissected a defense better than Peyton Manning. Now there was times obviously that the defense called him and shit like that. Hence the how Drew Brees got one of his rings off one of Peyton Manning's interceptions to Sharpe did or something, whatever his name was.
Sharper.
That pretty much sealed it. Yep.
Oh no, wait a
Sealed
minute.
it.
Oh, not Sharper. Oh, god damn it. Who the fuck was it? It was some
Wasn't
random.
it Sharper? I thought it was Sharper.
No, I don't think so. This is gonna bother me.
Yeah, we're definitely talking about the same guy.
Yeah.
Who?
No, I'm saying I can't. The name's not Tracy Porter.
Yeah, but Tracy Porter. Yep. There you go. That's it. Yep. And everyone knows. If anyone's seen that Super Bowl, everyone knows that moment. Peyton would have 3 rings right now if it wasn't for that. And then the debacle in New York when he went up against Seattle and
God,
the snap of the game, first snap, the game was over.
Yeah.
He would have 4 rings if it wasn't for that horrible start where they couldn't even look back from.
Mm-hmm.
It was over from jump. Other than that,
yep.
And the Saints it was the Saints' destiny to win that Super Bowl after Hurricane Katrina. Peyton Manning to me is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, quarterback of all time. It's between him and Michael Vick as my favorite quarterbacks of all time. Michael Vick was more personal to me because growing up, I wanted to be a quarterback, and we played the same, elusive and shit like that. People compared me to him like that. You remember shit like that when we were growing up. So Mike was different for me, but Peyton Manning, when you just define quarterbacks, it was him. Just he has the most MVPs at quarterback position. So shit like that. For me, it was really hard for me not to put him at 2. It was really, really hard. The only reason why I didn't put him at 2 is because of the Super Bowl losses. That's it.
His
only reason. And he didn't have great playoff success. Those were the 2 things that kept him up. Regular season was amazing. Playoff success, he kept running into those damn Patriots and Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let me explain why he's my. The Super Bowl losses are bad losses, and just answer this: is number 1 for you Tom Brady?
Yeah.
Is number 2 Joe Montana?
Yes.
Okay. If you're at number 3. And your arch nemesis is number 1, mainly because he dominated you for the bulk of your career, that's a problem. That holds you down.
Right.
In terms of Joe Montana, 2nd or maybe 3rd if you're an asshole. Best dynasty in NFL history. Joe Montana is the architect of it. Bill Walsh is the architect. Jerry Rice was the beneficiary. Joe Montana was the guy, was the motor that drove the whole fucking thing.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah,
no question.
Also when he ended up playing for the Chiefs, I love shit like this. Beat the fucking Niners after they let him go.
Yep.
Love shit like that. And just Joe Montana, and again, barely qualified for my list because of the years that he played. And I'm talking barely. I think he retired in like 94. But he's just one of those. He's too good to not have been on this list. There's just no other way to put it.
4-0.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4-0 in the Super Bowls. He kept my Cowboys away from a few. So, all the respect to him.
And then as much as it pains me to say this, Tom Brady is the best quarterback of all time.
No question.
It's just not close.
I had to give that up. For a long time, I tried to debate it.
It's not though. Amount of Super Bowls,
right?
The MVPs, but again, the same.
Yeah, now it's not.
The similarities with Montana and him with being a part of a dynasty with a legendary head coach always had good weapons, but I'm going to give Brady more credit this year, assuming he's going to do really good in Bruce Arians' offense. So now, like, the whole system argument goes out the fucking window.
Yeah, no question. No question. For me,
what?
No, go ahead.
Oh, I want to hear who this is. I'm almost more curious in who's on your just missed.
For me, my just miss were Troy Aikman.
Okay.
One of my favorite quarterbacks growing up.
Yeah.
Another 49er and Young, Steve Young.
Yep.
Another great one, quarterback. Yeah, those two, and Drew Brees. Big Ben.
Yeah, he's on mine.
He's going to go down as one of the greatest.
Ben's a Hall of Famer.
He's going to go down as one of the greatest quarterbacks.
Yep.
No question. So, yeah, those were my three guys that I just missed it.
So, in my hypothetical 6 spot, Mike Vick. I would love to have Mike Vick. I had Mike Vick at the very end of his career, after prison and after the Eagles. But watching him with Atlanta was disgusting. And watching him with Philly after jail was disgusting.
Yep.
Not just because of the running. He has one of the greatest arms I've ever seen.
And a lefty, too.
Yeah. Behind Vic, in the same category, Randall Cunningham.
Ooh, I like that.
Then I have Favre.
Vikings.
Then I have Steve Young. Then I have Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers. And then at the very, very end, I had Elway and Aikman just because they deserve to be recognized.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
For me, I made the argument that Aaron Rodgers deserves to be in the conversation. But for me, I had to leave him out of this conversation. Like I said, he's only been to one. He won one, but he hasn't had much success since then. So he's, as far as individual stats, it's been great, but he hasn't done much after that. So I couldn't put him with these guys. These went there multiple times in an era where it was a lot tougher.
Yeah.
Besides Tom Brady, obviously.
Well, yeah. But, even guys like Warren Moon could do that.
Tom Brady benefited a lot.
Yeah. But even guys like Warren Moon could be, popped into my head for consideration.
No question.
And then Mahomes could very easily be on this list in another 10 to 12 years.
Yeah, no question. He can definitely be on this list. He can definitely be one at this list if his success continues. He's already got a ring and an MVP and 2 starting years. Yeah, he easily had 2 by now.
And then the other guy who was very hard to leave off this list, and he wasn't really a serious top 5 contender, but he was in the just missed category. I didn't read off his name. Russell Wilson deserves credit.
Okay. Well,
what? That's
a great point.
But bear in mind, I also, on my just missed, I had Vic, Cunningham, Warren Moon, and Steve Young.
Right.
Russell Wilson is the same archetype of quarterback.
Yep, absolutely. He can easily have 2 rings right now. No questions. Been to 3.
Yeah.
So,
but even last season, it's not like he's on his rookie contract. He's still performing at an MVP caliber level. And there's really in the NFL right now, there's only maybe 2 quarterbacks I would take over him.
Right. Exactly.
Obviously, Mahomes is the best quarterback. Right now he's a top 3 quarterback in the league.
Mhm.
It's and the only two
I would say so, no question.
and the only 2 you would take over him, maybe, one of whom is an iffy thrower, but a better runner, and then Patrick Mahomes is the undisputed GOAT right now in the end. Sorry, Brady, you're 42, 43. If I'm drafting a team like a fantasy draft, I'm not taking a 43-year-old quarterback.
Right, no question. Yeah, and you can even throw Drew Brees in there even still, because he still puts up the numbers each and every year.
Too old. Russell Wilson is the oldest quarterback I would take in a quote-unquote hypothetical fantasy draft.
Oh, no, I would take him over him, no question. But I think he could, as far as if a guy to lead you to something, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. I would put Drew Brees in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, yeah, I think that's everything, unless you have anything else you wanted to point out.
That's literally everything I had here. Next week, did you finish your – next week, for those of you listening or watching, we're doing this exact same format, but with defense.
Defense, baby. Side that wins championships.
Yeah.
My favorite.
And there's 2 guys that are going to come up next week. I know damn well you have both of them on one of your lists. You talk about guys, talk about Peyton Manning. There's 2 specific guys that were very good at fucking with him. And they will come up next week. If anyone can figure it out in the comments, either on Patreon, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, wherever the fuck we post clips to this, if you guess who's on my mind, you will be rewarded.
Word.
I think Sean knows what I'm talking about.
I definitely have one of them in my mind. I definitely have one of them.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it after this.
Yeah.
Also, if you have your own list that you want to come up with for the offense just alone, please, in the comments, once we share it to the social media and to YouTube, share what your top 5 at each position is, and I'll be sure, or Luke will be sure to respond to your comment and give some feedback on that.
Yeah.
But other than that, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate you guys. It's your boy Jones, Luke, Locker Room Sunday, Jones for Sports. We make sports better. Peace. Jones for Sports. We make sports better.